They want to basically monetize the gold that's in Fort Knox and West Point. Uh, Even assuming that we do have 8,300 tons, which I don't think, I mean, I think maybe we have 10% of that or 15% of that. But even if we had 8,300 tons, they want to revalue it from $42 up to the current 2,500, and that will raise somewhere around, I don't know, the number's about $600 billion, and they want to buy Bitcoin with that, and that's supposedly going to wipe out our debt. Well, uh, I mean, you're talking about you'd have to have uh, you'd have to have that $600 billion go what 50-fold or more in order to wipe out the debt, and they're putting it into Bitcoin, which again, in my opinion, it's digital air. It's nothing, and we're going to find out when everything collapses that that's exactly what it is nothing but digital air.
Yeah, that idea is being floated around as well. But with the dollar, we already see weaponization of the U.S. dollar, which is still currently the world's reserve currency. But would something like this, where the world's reserve currency is more susceptible to being politicized, or let's say the gold that was supposed to be there is found out not to be there, and then it's being sort of backed in a way by Bitcoin in a sense. Would this even cause more nations to want to de-dollarize?
Well, that's exactly what's happened. The weaponization, it's not a new thing. The dollar has been weaponized for years and years, and they started ratcheting the the uh, the weaponization up during the previous administration. Um, and now you've got they basically stole the $300 billion of Russian treasuries, and they're borrowing or using that as collateral to fund Ukraine. So it's been totally weaponized, and there's been pushback. The pushback has been the formation of the BRICS. And I think that very well could be, if you want to call it the reverse Bretton Woods moment, where the dollar actually loses reserve currency status because they no longer want to trade and use dollars for settlement. And the amount of dollars that have been used in settlement, that's been, it has been declining, but it's going to go off a cliff. And especially if they announce a 20 to 40% backing of their new currency, they're calling it the unit. If they back that currency with 20 to 40% gold backing, you'll see pure fiat currencies collapse, and you'll see the price of gold explode.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, considering the timing of it all, they could make this announcement, let's say, before U.S. elections, and I believe if they should do that, that will really throw things into a tailspin.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously, the hard stop, if you will, is November 5th. That's the election. And I've been on record since, I guess, November last year that I thought there was less than a 50-50 or less chance that there'd even be an election, because if it looks like uh, the current administration is going to lose power, you will see some type of enormous false flag so that they can say, well, we would have had an election except for this. And I mean, the BRICS meeting itself blowing up the dollar, that alone could uh, could throw markets into such a tailspin that they close and they just pull the plug out of the wall.
This false flag, let's say, should there be one, what do you think it may be? Another like financial collapse, let's say, or possibly war, let's say, or more conflict in different areas?
It could be anything.
Anything, yeah.
Yeah, it could be anything.
You mentioned the 35 trillion in debt. I guess going to that debt clock where we see things like this 35 trillion. I looked at it earlier today, and about every second there was about $20,000 more in U.S. debt being held by foreign countries. More debt being issued while the trade deficit is still growing. more oil is being imported. How are these countries, let's say, holding the US debt? How are they going to be paid back?
They won't. They won't be paid back. They'll be paid back in dollars, but the dollar, I mean, it may cost you $50,000 for a cup of coffee. So getting paid back in a currency that's basically worthless, what, other than for appearances, so that they can say no, the U.S. never defaulted. They'll just deflate, or yeah, they'll inflate the currency, the dollar away, and they'll deflate the purchasing power to zero. So no, that 35 trillion won't get paid back. Um, and the true number is over 200 trillion, um, because you got to add in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Fannie Mae, Ginnie Mae, all the promises that the government has made. And all those promises basically are worth zero because we don't have the ability to pay it back.
Right. And so this is where oftentimes we hear where the Federal Reserve, is basically going to be the guy to be buying up most, if not, I don't want to say all, but most of the US debt. Should that happen, I mean, how is it where you have a country paying a bank, a private bank, to issue the currency, and then yet pay interest on top of that, and politicians just still run wild spending money and just making the debt larger and larger?
Well, if you go back to it's almost 200 years ago now. If you go back to Andrew Jackson, that was the argument back then. He did not want uh, a private banking system. He wanted the Treasury to issue currency. He wanted debt-free money. And that's been the problem, is that all money created carries debt, and the private bank is the one earning the interest.
Yeah, part of the reason why I'm asking these questions is because, with this added uncertainty of the US dollar and its demise, looking both internally and externally, why isn't the US looking harder at getting back to sound money such as silver, such as gold?
Because they can't do it. I mean, if we truly had 8,300 tons, or I mean, you look to the east. I mean, China's probably got 35,000 metric tons. I mean, I can show you easily, 25,000 tons. There's no question in my mind that they have that amount. But the U.S. does not have that metal that they can revalue, and, if you want to call it, refurbish their balance sheet. Um, they don't have the gold. They don't have there's no big stockpile of silver. And at this point, all it is kick the can down the road. They're trying to pretend and extend. And we just had an event, a week and a half ago. Japan's market collapsed. They lost 25% in 3 days. And I view that as, that's the warning shot of the global margin call that's going to come. And I expect that margin call to come between more than likely between now and the election. And we were told that the carry trade was 20 trillion. That's basically on books. Then you got to add the OTC to it. And is the number double? Is it triple? Is it 10 times? I mean, is the carry trade really 200 trillion and not 20 trillion? I mean, who knows? But what they're trying to tell us now is that 75% of the carry trade was eliminated in 3 days. And that is complete bullshit. There is absolutely no way that 20 trillion was unwound. And what took 30 plus years to build up was cleaned up in 3 days, and no one died.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard that carry trade thing, I was thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. They've been at low rates, no to low rates for decades, and
Right.
now all of a sudden this thing comes into play.
Well, understand that it all occurred because the Bank of Japan raised interest rates 0.15%. 0.15. And that blew up a 20, they say a $20 trillion carry trade, and that 75% of it was cleaned up in 3 days. And you didn't see one institution go bankrupt. That's complete folly. There is no possible way that 75% of something that took 30 years to build up just went away poof and nobody got hurt.
Right. You have any idea what it might have really been?
I certainly think if on books it's 20 trillion, then you've got the OTC positions. It's probably several multiples of that number. There's no telling uh, how much central banks from all around the world had to lend to banks. Remember back in, what was it, 2010, we found out that the Federal Reserve had lent out 17 trillion all over the world back in 2008, early 2009. We didn't find that out for like a year and a half. So by the time we find out what just happened and how much had to be put into the system to keep it from imploding, the system will have already imploded.
So we'll keep our eyes open and kind of piece together what might have really happened there. But with Asia and the BRICS, as you mentioned, they are looking at sound money, some type of a gold backing the unit. They
Right.
being the most populated regions on Earth, a manufacturer to the world, an energy supplier to the world, and let's say they are using this currency that nations can trust to settle trade. How does the West economically now compete with this?
I think the simple answer is two words. They won't. I mean, they won't be able to compete. And I mean, if you think about it, if the BRICS currency comes forth, and you've got nations all over the world selling dollars because they no longer need to hold dollars to buy oil or to settle trade. Who's going to buy those dollars? I mean, is it the Federal Reserve that steps up and buys the dollars? And with what capital do they do that with? I mean, the Federal Reserve right now is technically insolvent. I mean, they've lost more on the bond portfolio than they had in equity to begin with. So, is it even feasible to print new dollars to buy old dollars? I mean, that's you're blowing the money supply up. You're contracting it on one part. You're you're uh, you're expanding it on the other part. But in order to create dollars, to buy dollars, you have to have a buyer for those dollars, someone who will accept the dollars. So I mean, you're looking at the reserve currency losing reserve currency status, which is roughly 60% of the average central bank in the West. That's what they hold. So what are they going to trade with? Because the BRICS clearly want to trade something real for something real. And the dollar is not something real, so they're not going to accept that. What you're going to see is the standard of living decimated by 50% or far more across the West. Because I mean, you're not going to get a Chinese company or a Russian company or any of the BRICS companies. They're not going to ship goods to the United States in with payment in dollars. They're going to want payment in the BRICS unit, or they're going to want payment in another something that's real. Wheat, natural gas. I mean, go down the list. But they're going to want something real for something real. And because they've financialized the Western economies, the Western financial systems for literally going on, what, call it 40 years, we don't make anything anymore. So we don't have stuff to trade back something real for something real. We're going to have to start all over again. And like I said, the standard of living is going to be completely decimated.